All right, everyone, welcome to another NFL team preview for the 2020 season. We're continuing on with the AFC South teams, and today we've got the Houston Texans, so let's begin. All right, so for the Houston Texans last year, everything seemed to be going pretty well. They won their fourth straight division title. They won a playoff game against the Buffalo Bills, and they were up 24-0 against the Kansas City Chiefs at halftime for their second playoff game. That's when it all fell apart. And they ended up losing that game against the Chiefs 51-31, and ever since then it's felt like this team has just been in a downward spiral where questionable decisions have been made one after another, and Bill O'Brien has received a brunt of the criticism, being both the team's head coach and de facto general manager. So now we enter in a weird space where the Texans don't feel like they got better during the offseason. It feels like they've got worse, and now I guess with the personnel that they've acquired to replace some of the pieces that they've lost over the last 2 years, there's a lot of good potential, but there's some scary injury history. So before we get into the roster, let's take a look at the 2019 recap. They were 10-6 overall. Offense ranked 13th in the league. They were 15th in passing, 9th in rushing. The defensive rank, they were 28th overall, 29th against the pass, and 25th against the run. A lot is going to depend on the defense this year. Bill O'Brien enters his 7th season as your head coach, career record of 52-44. Snapshot of the previous 4 years. In 2018, they were 11-5. 2017, they were 4-12. 2016, they were 9-7, and 2015, they were 9-7. I guess I need to correct myself. It's not their fourth straight division title. It's their fourth division title in the last 5 years. So 4 out of 5, they've been division champs, but they've had no real playoff success despite winning a few games here and there. So, looking ahead, let's go ahead and start with the predicted depth chart roster. We'll go ahead and start on the defense, which needs to improve itself a lot this year. But the secondary looks like it's going to be more of the same this year. We of course have Reed, who is probably looking at a Pro Bowl season this year in his third year. The opposite of him for the next safety, I went with Eric Murray, but there's a lot of different options that the team could go with. But I think Murray probably just wins the starting job out of the gate. For the corners, we have Bradley Roby, and we also have Garyon Conley that they acquired last year through a trade. I believe Vernon Hargreaves is still on this team, so that is a pretty decent secondary, if you will, as long as they can figure out the other safety position. Linebackers include Wynton Merciless, McKinney, Zach Cunningham, and Scarlett. That is a pretty fine unit. Not great, but not bad. Jack of all trades, master of none, if you will. And the defensive line is where the real issue is going to be. J.J. Watt needs to stay healthy. Obviously, Dunn will probably step in to replace Reeder, who left in free agency, who is a quality backup, but we'll have to see how he does in a starting role now. And, of course, on the other side, Blackson is pretty good against the run, but not a great pass rusher. So the defensive line, the front three and the front seven overall, really need to step up and do a lot better than they did last year, and that is what will help turn this team around. Now, they won 10 games despite having a rather porous defense, but they could do a lot better and take a lot off the offense, not having to do or get involved in a lot of shootouts in order to win games. So, speaking of the offense, this offensive line has been rebuilt very nicely for the last 2 years, and there was a point where I was like, Deshaun Watson needs to be protected or he is going to get killed. And they've done a good job since. Laramie Tunsil was, of course, acquired through the trade with the Miami Dolphins. He is the left tackle. Sharping was a second-round pick a year ago. Martin is your center. Fulton, your right guard. And Titus Howard is your right tackle, who was a first-round pick from a year ago, or 2 years ago. No, it was a year ago. Yeah, he was one of those surprise smaller school picks that went in the first round, ahead of a lot of offensive linemen that a lot of people thought would be drafted sooner. But he has worked out since. This offensive line could be pretty good heading into this season. For your tight end, you have Fells, and for the wide receivers, minus DeAndre Hopkins, because of course the trade that happened in the offseason with the Arizona Cardinals, where they got absolutely fleeced. Your wide receivers are Brandon Cooks, Randall Cobb, and of course Will Fuller. Now, the wide receiver group is questionable because, yes, there is a lot of talent. Yes, they are very fast. This is basically a track team masquerading as a wide receiver group. But they all have their various share of injury concerns. Brandon Cooks with his concussion, Will Fuller has missed time, and Randall Cobb is, I would want to say, or at least argue, that he's probably a shell of his former self during his highlight days in Green Bay. But if they can all stay healthy, Deshaun Watson is definitely capable of distributing the ball to replace the 104 catches and 1,600 yards that DeAndre Hopkins packed his bags and took to Arizona with. Deshaun Watson is definitely an elite quarterback, and he helps them a lot in the run game, which is a big reason why this team was 9th overall in rushing. He just has to make sure he doesn't hold on to the ball for too long and not take unnecessary hits. For your running backs, we now have David Johnson in the fold. He was part of the DeAndre Hopkins trade. Carlos Hyde wanted too much money, and he is no longer here. David Johnson, who had one 1,000-yard season and hasn't been himself ever since his wrist injury. He was actually benched last year after the Kenyon Drake trade in Arizona. And of course, the backup was still Duke Johnson, who was acquired in a trade with the Cleveland Browns last season. So that is your projected depth chart, at least for now, for the Houston Texans. It's not bad. I mean, this is the part where I would probably insert some commentary saying that there's potential for this team to, repeat as a division champion. But the Titans are now very scary. The Colts have made some improvements that we'll talk about in the next video. But if they can just stay healthy, if J.J. Watt doesn't miss 6 to 8 games this year, if the run defense is able to establish a decent pass rush, if the wide receivers aren't constantly off the field with their fair share of injuries that they've had in the past, it's just a lot of things have to go right for this to work. But at least on paper, for right now, this team can be good. So especially as long as you have Deshaun Watson under center, a lot of it's just going to depend on how well David Johnson fits this offense. Can he regain that 2016 season form, and can the wide receivers stay healthy? On defense, the secondary is pretty good. The linebackers are pretty good. The defensive line is going to be questionable with Reeder leaving via free agency, and can J.J. Watt stay healthy? Those are the two biggest question marks. So that's really what we're looking at in terms of, can this team be successful? Looking at the schedule for this season, you start a road game against the Chiefs, home game against the Ravens, a road game against the Steelers, a home game against the Vikings. That's a pretty tough first month for this team as far as the schedule goes. Then you got a home game against the Jaguars, road game against the Titans, Packers come to town, road game against the Jaguars. The bye week is week 8. For the second half of the season, trip to Cleveland, home game against the Patriots, a trip to Detroit, home game against the Colts, back-to-back road games with the Bears and the Colts, end the season against the Bengals and the Titans at home. So it's a pretty difficult schedule for the first month of the season. You have several playoff potential teams right there. The Chiefs are, of course, the defending Super Bowl champions. The Ravens, who are a heavy favorite to go back to, at least get to the Super Bowl this year after a disappointing playoff loss last season. The Steelers should be a much better team this year with a healthy Ben Roethlisberger. That defense is absolutely great, and it helped them, have an 8-8 season, which is not, of course, a losing season. So they are a team to be reckoned with. The Vikings are, of course, going to be a good team this year. And then after that, it's just going to depend on how well that this team can stick together and not get hurt. Let's just put it that way. And the most simplest answer is sometimes the best. So if we can, I don't want to harp on injuries. Things can happen to absolutely anybody at any given point in the season. Injuries can derail every single team in the league, but it feels like this team has some of the worst luck, and they've acquired a lot of players who have, histories that we need to talk about. So it's just going to be very prominent that they stay healthy and they don't take unnecessary hits at the vital positions where they don't have a lot of depth. So it's a pretty difficult schedule. I'm not going to say it's easy. They are in a pretty competitive division. I don't think this is a division that is easily won. And they have some tough matchups outside of the division with the Patriots, the Steelers, the Vikings, the Chiefs, and the Packers are not, a team to really take lightly. So for 3 big storylines this year, I've kind of touched on them briefly a little bit, but this is the post DeAndre Hopkins era, and it begins now. And how much our fans going to be upset with this team if they don't start off hot and things don't go well. Could Bill O'Brien be on the hot seat? I mean, I doubt it. I think a coach who has this kind of autonomy over a roster probably isn't looking over his shoulder to get fired anytime soon, at least in my opinion. The second storyline is David Johnson. Can he return to form? Is he over that wrist injury? Maybe a change of scenery will help. It does help a lot of players, so that could be the case here. And lastly, the defense, which I've harped on for, a pretty significant portion of this video. And being ranked 28th in defense is only going to get you so far, and then you run into teams in the playoffs that are really, really, really good at offense, and you play in the AFC where the Ravens and the Chiefs exist. So I don't know if we're going to have answers to how good this defense is going to be after those first 4 weeks, but we're going to know a lot about what this team is made of by the time they get to that first Jaguars game. So that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.